Welcome, everybody, to this new episode of Canine's Talking Sense. Even though my guest isn't new, but Dr. Melanie Uhde, thank you for joining us for this episode of Canine's Talking Sense. So, because you've been on before, and we're both kind of in this puppy stage of, I have a new puppy, you have a puppy. It's becoming harder and harder to call yours a puppy anymore. But mine's still in its later stages of cuteness. He'll still be, of course, they're always cute all their time. But
especially yours is always going to be cute.
Yeah, the little cute spaniels are always going to be. I had to wear my spaniel shirt, which I won't turn around and show everybody right now. But because I've now just fully embraced being a spaniel owner, since I now no longer gamble is gone to a handler to work full time, and then I have Ammo, and then now I have Neo, and it turned into a spaniel world. You're gaining Malinois.
I'm gaining Malinois,
yes.
Collecting them.
Yes.
But I don't know how many more I can handle, honestly.
Well, we were just talking off air, but, you're almost there, because all you need now is a Sprinter van or a transit van. Once you have that, then we can go. You are now one of the crazy Malinois people that's a full-time dog person, right?
Yeah. Well, like I said, I will resist this a little bit longer. I really like my normal car, my normal SUV, and so far it's holding up for the demands, but we will see.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Yeah,
we'll talk about it in a year.
Yes,
in a year again.
And we live in the wrong area to have big cars anyway. Like if we try to go any place, parking is next to nothing. I was amazed how long Michael could have as big of vans as he's always had and live up in Northern California.
Yeah.
But I'm guessing, and now knowing him, I know he doesn't travel that much around town, so he can, wherever he goes around here, we can still fit a big van in. But anyway, I digress.
He learned in New York City, so I guess he learned good parking skills there.
Yes, that's for sure. So, since the last time we talked, which was episode 100.
Yes, I remember that.
Yes.
What episode is this?
This is going to be episode 128.
Okay.
So 28 episodes later, so just slightly over a year later, here we are again. But this time you're in studio because you live up here. Yes. So it makes it super easy to do these kinds of things.
It does.
So Canine Decoded has grown quite a bit from the last time that we talked. Yay. So just give us a little bit of background of what you've been doing with Canine Decoded and kind of like just a recap over the past year for you since last time we talked.
Yeah, that's a good question. Because I don't remember where I was at exactly when we talked.
You were still in Atlanta.
Yes, I was still in Atlanta. I remember that. And I think I just started to put out a lot more content on the neurobiology of behavior in general. And I was mainly just, producing content for social media and going on podcasts. And since then, still doing that. Probably even more so, but a little more targeted. Yeah. And in addition to the educational programs, my now 2 times a year running big flagship program, Triple Helix, is currently running. And then smaller programs for everyone who is really interested in the longevity aspect of dogs and dog behavior, which covers the learning, the eating, obviously sleep and social connection and movement, basically. So the 5 pillars. And then other seminars with Michael that is coming up in November on the aversive control and reinforcement framework strategies, whatever you want to call it. So basically it has a little bit more, it's more fine-tuned, it's a little bit more targeted, but at the same time, all the content on social media is still going on.
Yeah. You've definitely kind of, like you said, once you kind of became more targeted in, I think, being a voice to digest the research that people often share, and more specifically, obviously, the bigger conversations of what defines balanced and force-free and all of this stuff. How has that been for you as you've... because with that, I would say that debate that's out there didn't really have people with PhDs who study it. It has a lot of well-educated trainers, or I would say trainers who read a lot and share information, still with lots of perspective or subjectivity to reading the papers. So how has that been, trying to be a voice that say, hey, I have a degree in this field and I read these papers and here's what this is?
Yeah. Well, that kind of went through an evolution too, as I talked about this more. And, I knew that there is this debate, but I didn't know how
impassioned it was.
Yeah, that's a very nice wording.
Yes, yeah.
And especially on social media, and the comment section is kind of the space where you apparently can be the meanest person that bring out the evil.
Which is super
in you.
ironic for the force-free world to be such fucking assholes online. Yeah. I know both sides can be that way, but damn, the amount of people who won't listen, the amount of people who don't care, and again, I'm not going to target one side or the other, but the irony I find from kind of sitting on the outside and watching is just the complete contrary behavior of how they treat humans for what people say they want to treat animals like.
Yeah.
That, to me, was a shocking piece. Again, I don't sit in that world very often. I don't engage in that world very often. But watching it from the sidelines, holy cow.
Holy cow is the right word, yeah. I had this series that just the name of it, I thought it's just cute and funny, but apparently that alone kind of upset a lot of people. I called it de-douchify dog training, science-based dog training.
I did remember seeing that, yes.
And de-douchify and all that, and people felt offended by it, of course, and then our big social influencers, Zach George and all his followers, they jumped in, and the amount of personal attacks and personal assassinations was a little crazy. And I was like, okay, I'm just gonna not do anything about this, or I'm not gonna respond because it's pointless.
Yes.
It's really pointless to have a normal conversation, and just gonna stay quiet and do my other stuff too. So I kind of removed myself a little bit and didn't respond to these things. But then every now and then, when you talk about science, you don't have a choice. But every now and then you have to talk about, when you talk about resilience, to talk a little bit about aversive control and whatnot, that I post something about it and they would come back. It's kind of like a magnet. As soon as they put their eyes on it, and so they flock to it like the moth to the light. But then it was so outrageous that at some point it was like, well, fuck that. Why the heck should I not respond to something that is so pointless? And in particular, the personal attacks on something that I say without ever engaging in the actual science. If you want to talk science, talk about the science itself, and I don't mind. Everyone who's been in the science world and goes to conferences, scientists can be really mean to each other too.
Oh, yes.
But we attack the science itself, you didn't have the right controls, or this is not the right setup. But we don't go personal that way, but they do.
Yeah.
So I started to then respond publicly more often to these kind of nonsense comments. And actually, it's gotten a little quieter, which is almost sad.
Yeah, right.
I warmed up now.
Yeah. You're
I'm ready to.
Okay, let's go through. Let's do this. Yeah.
But yeah, this is where we're at, and kind of I'm not shying away anymore from confronting nonsense stuff. But at the same time, I'm still trying to be very welcoming to everyone. And I have a lot of people that reach out and say, I don't want to make it public that I'm a transitioning dog trainer from Force Free 2, but I like your stuff and I learn from you. And big names that also kind of say, I can't really commit to this, but I understand where you're coming from. So there's a bunch of things happening behind the scenes, behind the social media scenes. You might even say reality. But in the public social media phase, I'm ready for the fight.
Yeah. Well, I mean, again, as I sit from the sideline, not being actively on either side, again, I highlight both sides can be assholes for sure. I mean, it's both sides will be insulting. The part that I find where I have less tolerance for is the hypocritical aspect of the side that says we are all for positive everything, yet behavior from human to human is complete opposite of that. So then that makes me wonder about you, not you as Dr. Melanie Uhde, but you as a person commenting that if this is the stance that you believe in, why is your behavior to fellow humans horrible?
Yeah.
And why can't we respectfully disagree? Why can't we, because I think we both know this too, and Michael Ellis and I have had this conversation, the hardest thing online is you never convince anybody of anything. Because you can't have this kind of conversation.
Right.
Because many of the people who spout off on the social media, if you sat them in a room with you, may or may not engage the same way. And I'm going to go with mostly the may not, because that requires some courage and some heart to say what they say behind a keyboard to then say to your face. Yes. Some will, absolutely some will. The majority won't, right. and I know this because I've lived it. I've seen it in other genres of what we do as humans. But that's part of, I guess, what social media has created for us is this level of anonymity where I can get away with really poor behavior and do the things I want to do with no repercussions behind it.
Yeah.
So it's a tough debate. I mean, it's anything, and we can then zoom out even further and look at just us in the world and politics and beliefs of this and that. And these behaviors are, even more amplified depending on how impassioned you are or how much you feel it's important in your life to do that. But when I watched you evolve into getting into those debates with in those circles of dog training, balanced, force-free, and all this kind of stuff, I was definitely feeling your pain, but then also sitting back and going, wow, there's a lot of contradictory behaviors happening in humans that I find highly ironic because of the beliefs held by one side or the other side. So, hats off to you for stepping into the fire, doing that. You kind of hit some of it. Has there been a big takeaway you've had as far as when you've heard discussions from the different views that you've read through or shared? Has it been something you'd be like, you know what, I have that as a takeaway in future conversations with people on these topics? Has anything like that happened to you?
There was someone I talked to. She scheduled a call with me because she used to be a pure positive or force-free trainer, and she just wanted to have a conversation in like a respectful way, just showing curiosity. You can already get like hammered for it as a force-free trainer, and she said, I used to think like everyone who uses an e-collar or prong collar, I used to think they're all assholes. And that's the kind of the concept that is being amplified on purpose, right? That everyone who uses these tools is abusing dogs and it's just being mean. And then she was saying, but as I was like, stripping that off and just like immersing myself in some of those concepts, and you have to hit the right people, like people talking intelligently about this, like Michael Ellis, right? You can really easily engage in it without feeling there is any kind of ego involved to subdue the dog. And she was like, and I realized this is actually a very intelligent system. And I'm like, I could have not phrased it any better. This is so true. How much thought can go into, not just the reinforcement strategies, which is also by itself a very, very intelligent system, but then you have the aversive control as a system and how that kind of all comes together. And that's that can take a very long time to grasp. And I might be able, for example, to grasp it on paper from the science, and then executing it. I'm learning it right now, like the hard way, more or less, can be really hard. And then vice versa too, how to explain this and teach others. And I thought this was a very cool conclusion that she came to just by exposing herself to these kind of things. And then other things that I realized is that maybe a lot of force-free trainers, for example, maybe hold that value but just don't know how to express it, is I don't really care what the science says. I'm not doing aversive control or positive punishment for other reasons, but I don't need science for me to commit to that. And I think that's totally valid too.
Sure.
And then if everyone who is convinced on either of those sides by saying, I don't need necessarily science to tell me what I want to do, then we are kind of leveled out. No one is the evil person or the one that is on the morally higher pedestal, right? And then we can actually use science to say, okay, well, whatever you use, here are, nuances that science can help you with. Yeah.
So and I know for me, I found it even more, best word I can think of is interesting, the fact that when a trainer, like you described there, wants to kind of evaluate something other than the purely positive force-free, they're afraid to say anything to anybody because they get shunned immediately if they share that they're willing to hear or even try something other than this is the way, which again is complete irony. The fact that they feel in such fear of the control of the purely positive force-free side, that's got to say something. And if I'm on that side, the purely positive force-free side, I wouldn't want people in my same demographic to fear repercussions because I wanted to learn something, or I wanted to see it for myself, or I wanted to learn for myself what was truth. And the fact that, because I know lots, there's even some in this room besides us that were very cautious about going from that world to any other world. And it was strictly because of the behavior of those within that side of the debate that they were going to get treated the way they were. Again, which is completely ironic. The side that says we don't like control only wants control, so much so that how dare you think different? How dare you do different? And if you do, you will feel the wrath of me and all my people. We will make your life miserable. We will come after you. So it's like, how do we not see the complete hypocrisy of all that? How is that? You know, and I already know someone will be like, well, I'm fighting for the animal that has no voice.
Right.
Okay. There's a whole different way we can go about that than going, because now you're going to make the people feel like the dog that you were trying to protect.
Right.
So there's got to be ways to have these intelligent conversations to enter debate, because you said it right there. That individual had to make modifications for their dog or their animal they're working with. And, you know, my trainer Natalie knows this about me. You know, I obviously grew up in the day and age as a trainer where there was no such thing as force-free. It was how much force can we get away with using kind of thing. And as I've aged and gotten older, I, for the most part, am not a favor of a lot of aversive. I'm not a big e-collar fan, even though I've used it in my years. And it's mostly because of this standpoint, not because I think it's a horrible thing. I also think, like any tool, and everybody says this, a lot of tools and a lot of uses can be abused, right? What I don't like about it is trainers jump into it as the easy button tool. I want to see you master your craft without this tool and see how good you can train that dog if you don't have this. What would you do in absence of this tool? Can you train the dog? Can you be creative? And the reason why I saw it is because in Germany, a lot of my friends who were German police, GSG-9, that had to lose the tool and then now had to learn how to train the dogs. And specifically, when I was with the SEAL teams, we were training with some of the GSG-9 guys, and literally all he had was probably about a 2-inch wide nylon collar. That's all it was. He had a clicker, and he had some food, and he had his toy. And we were out in the ocean do some ocean stuff. And I was asking him, I'm like, man, it's different, because when I lived in Germany, every tool was on the Teletech, everything was there, you had it all. And for those who don't know, a Teletech e-collar, it can like jumpstart your car. So those collars were like, because
gentle.
Yes. So to see the complete 180 flip to that was, I asked him, I'm like, oh man, how did that change your culture? How did that change your programs? He said a lot of trainers left. And I said, what made you stay? And he goes, I wanted to be uncomfortable so I could learn how to train a dog a different way. I said, I found that very admirable of him to go, you know what? You took this way, but I'm in it for the dogs. I'm in it as I become a skilled human being at the craft I'm in. How can I still train this dog using the constraints that I have? And so, and he did it. Like, the dog was fantastic. I mean, I was super impressed with the quality of the dog. But he also brought up a big part too, which was the type of dogs selected were now very different than the dogs they had before.
Yeah, that makes sense.
They also almost all raise their dogs from puppies now. And the same thing Natalie and I saw when we went to Switzerland, which again has very similar laws and rules, that they do a very similar thing. A lot of them raise their dogs now as puppies. do so with obviously very clearly, heavily positive reinforcement-based training, setting up guardrails in the sense of the dog will get nothing if this happens, positive if this happens, and there's some decision making. They do set up some constraints. There are some physical aversives, but it's nothing more than, let's say, leash pressure or things of that nature, because so many of the other things have been changed or taken away, or in some cases just require licensing, for lack of a better term. They have to go see a training warden or whatever they call it that will approve that this dog or this team needs this tool. The other unique thing I learned from friends in Germany, and I even had a guest on his podcast that basically talked about how it was changed overnight. There was literally no debate that occurred. And then all these police dogs, all of a sudden, the police officers were going to be now in violation of the law, and it happened literally overnight. So they did what most people did. He said this was a downside to it, which was we trained in the dark, meaning like we trained in the shadows. Nobody knew what we were doing. We still had the tools. We still got it done. He goes, but that didn't help the cause at all, because basically it made those who felt removal of the tool was worth it because, look, they're doing it without it, but they really weren't doing it without it.
Right.
So they were helping the other side out by doing it in the shadows. So I think that's another thing that has to be discussed, is when we take something away without potential conditions or opportunities for usage under certain cases. But the bigger part that I felt was really good in most of those countries was the fact that if you go to that tool, you have to receive X amount of hours of education to use it under very good supervision.
Right.
And again, the bigger picture for me personally is I want to see a handler or a trainer utilize all the other things they have in their trainer's toolbox to train the dog in front of them before they result to certain types of aversives. We all know it's just like human beings. There's just people that are just crazy motherfuckers. You know, there's only so much shit you can do. So there's some of those dogs are that exact same category that there's only so much you can do. And then that leads to, well, in absence of a tool, we now use medication, right? So tell me a little bit about what happens when we switch from tools to now medical treatment or chemical treatment. What does that start to do? Because I know you shared a little bit about that.
Yeah, I think that applies a lot to the pet dogs. Because for someone who gets a dog, you know, this is like, where does it even start? For someone who gets a dog who wants a Malinois or, I don't know, a hunting dog, and is like, I want to dabble a little bit with detection. I'm getting a crazy spaniel, I don't know, from working line, whatever. And they're just not prepared. And then you have this puppy that is crazy and just can't settle. All they want to do is cuddle on the couch with the puppy. And I wanted to do this with either of my mouths, and I didn't get any of it, ever. And they don't know, it feels wrong. They're like, that shouldn't be like that. So there the education is already lacking. And then puppy raising, puppy development is all force-free, as it should, right? It's not like you need to have any kind of aversive control on a 4-month-old puppy. But then you kind of often accelerate or amplify the wrong behaviors because the puppy gets like, oh, I'm going to get all these things done, right? But then sometimes, you know, if you're bad, putting the dog in the crate because it should be free, and like all these things kind of just snowball into the wrong direction. And then you have this dog that can't settle, is very nervous, potentially over-socialized. All the things come together and now is being diagnosed with generalized anxiety or anxiety when seeing the doctor, whatever it is, something anxiety, right? Because nowadays everything is something with anxiety.
They even have a song for it now too. It's like one of the most popular songs.
Yeah, it's exactly. Like, oh my God. And it's cool almost to be anxious and go to therapists and all that. And, you know, our world kind of reflects so much our dog's world, so it's kind of the same almost.
Ford Canine membership. Many of you guys remember our 3 levels. We had bronze, silver, and gold. But July 1st of this year, we decided to make it one membership for everybody. And that was thanks to your feedback. In addition to your feedback, we've also added a Facebook group for Ford Canine members. In this Facebook group, We share lots of videos. You members can also post videos in there for myself or Natalie to review. We made this resource based on your input of wanting more interaction with us. With the Ford Canine membership, you also get discounts to everything on our website. So if you haven't joined Ford Canine membership, you definitely should. We've just posted videos of puppy cognition with my new dog, Neo. My lectures, what we've just done in Vancouver and other locations, are all posted there. So that way, even though you may not attend a seminar, you're going to hear my lectures every time I go out and teach. We also share videos of me working my dog, Ammo, and Natalie working her dogs, and other people working their dogs, all for the sole purpose of sharing information, answering questions, letting you guys ask questions, and give input as a collective group and community. To join, go to FordK9.com. Up top, click on membership, and we hope to see you in the group.
And
so right there, how much of it do you feel could be dog or human to dog transference of this anxiety behavior? Is that a real thing that we have to? We make jokes all the time, like, oh look, the dog and the human are a lot alike. Could that also be? Yeah, could that also be in our emotion and feelings and anxiety?
Yeah, I think there's a bunch of studies. I haven't really read them or like went into detail, but yeah, I think it's 100% happening. I mean, not just that they can smell our stress, but I think they pick up on a lot of things and our mannerism, right? Mm-hmm. And if we can settle and constantly fidget around and the way we talk to them, they kind of pick up on that not being settled too. And I think it's very clear, even if you have the dog interacting with two people of the same household and have a different temperament and personality, they get a lot more excited to see one and a lot less excited to see the other. And it kind of just is reflected on everything, how they share. And I think they 100%. The funny thing is when people get dogs so they can help with their own anxiety. And it's like, I need my own therapy dog. And that dog gets anxious too because the person is anxious.
Yes,
well, that didn't work out. Now everyone is on medication. I have people who comment on some of my stuff and say, you have 3 dogs and we are all, including me, on anxiety medication. And I'm like, and you don't think something is wrong with that?
Yeah.
Like, no, this is normal. That's the new normal.
Yeah.
So yeah, anyways, medication is the way to go now to treat anxiety. And what we define as anxiety is anything that means not being able to settle, or a little bit too excited, or barking when someone comes in. And anxiety, because we want our dogs to be calm, and calmness is kind of like in our society today, the most achievable goal of being. Don't ever get upset, or don't ever have to.
Boy, that's going over really well in the world today. Jeez.
Yeah. And then everyone has like an outlet somewhere in my comment section, right?
Yes, right.
And it's very, very easy to go to the vet and get medication for it because everyone does it. Not everyone does it, but
it's a much more common thing now, right?
It's not looked down upon like it is when you decide to use aversive control, right? It's okay. I can understand it. Yes, it sounds stressful. Here's a pill, here's trazodone, here's fluoxetine, here's gabapentin if needed. And that kind of snowballs into a normal way of living with your dog, because then the dog is a little bit mellow, is a little bit more suppressed maybe. Not always, but it seems to work. And then they're worried to take them off medication again because, oh my God, that monster could come back. I don't know how to handle it. And to be fair, it is hard. It is hard to live with a dog that can't settle unless you really know what you're getting into, or like you have the skills. It can be very frustrating and it can be very overwhelming with every puppy. And if you're then getting told that this is not normal by people around you, or you have this vision of the perfect dog, your first thing might not think, well, maybe there's a way to train it, because if you probably Google, and it will tell you, well, reward calm behavior. And it's like, yeah, we're stuffing all the treats in my dog's face and it still wants more. And it's like, yeah, maybe you actually anticipate or amp up the dog for it, but no one tells you that. And it's like, my dog is broken, gotta go to the vet. There we are with medication.
Obviously it happens to humans. What happens when a dog's brain gets exposed to these chemicals, and I'd have to guess that it could also be age related if I start it so soon. And the reason why I'm thinking of this is because there was somebody I dated years ago, and she had shared with me that because of her anxiety, she took Xanax, and then she also would take whatever the popular one to go to sleep is, Ambien. And she got to the point where it was having less and less of an effect, and they had to constantly adjust dosages and things like that. Do dogs face some of those same, let's say, tolerance building aspects to some of these medications, and or does it also change brain chemistry if it's introduced at a certain age?
Yeah, so both happens for drugs that have a predominantly sedative effect. Trazodone is one meant to be short-term use because of the sedative effect. That effect fades, so you would have to increase the concentration just because the body kind of adapts. Like, hey, we can't be that sleepy all the time, and we're making less of the receptors that bind that medication, so we have a new normal, and it fades away, the sedation part of it. And other medication that are maybe less sedating the dog, but more really trying to actually change the brain chemistry, like the classic SSRIs, fluoxetine, work like that. They the brain adapts the same way, but it kind of tries to counterbalance excitatory versus inhibitory circuits in the brain, which then ultimately should make the dog a little bit calmer on a more natural, slow way. But two things happen there. The brain changes. And now if you have a puppy that is still developing with the brain and is already influenced by outside medication, the changes might not be the way we want the brain to change.
Or natural for a dog in general.
Right.
Okay.
That might have consequences later on, and more often than not, those consequences mean more anxiety. And even without having this in a younger dog happening, it can happen in an adult dog too. Because ultimately what we're trying to do is like increase serotonin in one way or another. There are different mechanisms, but the level of serotonin is supposed to be increasing in the brain. That's supposed to be minimizing anxious symptoms. But anxiety isn't just about the serotonin level. And serotonin is kind of like it's everywhere. It influences everything in the brain. So, of course, if you increase globally serotonin, there might be things that you don't want happening at the same time. It might cancel out the anti-anxiety effects. And you just don't know what's happening in the brain. And in humans, like not everyone, but a lot of people that depressed or have anxiety and they're on medication, sooner or later they will talk about side effects. They will say it doesn't work anymore. They will say they don't really feel that great. But we can't ask dogs that. And just because they're wagging their tails and might be a little more mellow doesn't mean that they feel content or happy or actually good about themselves. And I think there's a lot of potential conflict happening between, I kind of want to react, but I can't, weirdly. And that must feel super weird. And they can't express it, and we just give them more and more of it. And it sounds very dramatic, but I think for some dogs that's exactly what's happening. And we do not know. People say the medication is mostly safe, which is true, but we talk about neurotoxicity. Like you're unlikely to die from it. But I think our standards should be a little bit higher.
Higher than you don't die.
Yeah. Especially with our technology.
YOLO.
Exactly. Especially with the technology we have nowadays. So I think there's a little bit more nuance needed. And I don't know if it's necessarily on the vets or behaviorists or the owners or the trainers or just general education. But it's way too easy to get the medication for what we know what's actually or not happening, basically.
Now, like humans, I had Tim Howling on a couple episodes ago, and we were talking about how we've gone to a lot of what I call more organic chemistry or organic medications from mushrooms, or the different psychedelics that are out there that have helped treat PTSD in humans and have had really good effects on addiction and things like that. The reason why I asked this question is there something like this for dogs? Because I also know of a dog trainer who took a dog that had this horrible life from shelter to shelter, was getting dropped off, and had this crazy level of just how to deal with stress. And he kind of made it a goal that he was going to show you can do this. But at the same time, to get over the hump, microdosed mushrooms for the dog. And the dog was going around going, these colors sound so cool. So but it ended up having a really good effect. Very, very positive. It only needed to be used for a period of time, but it was. Have you seen anything in regards to medication, or not medications, but organic things like this that is it becoming more popular? Is it happening in the dog world more, or is it still like mad scientist kind of thing?
Yeah, I'm not sure. I mean, I'm sure there are people experimenting with that, and they probably see some changes.
Yep.
I wouldn't be surprised to have some positive changes for like super short, long term, right? Changes. I mean, if it works in humans and we have medically assisted, all that kind of stuff, why? I mean, there are reasons why it wouldn't work in the dog, but there are also reasons why it could also work with the dog. CBD is probably the closest that we hear of, and you hear mixed results there.
Yeah.
Like depending on what kind of CBD you get and what kind of dog you have, and like it could be all over. It might as well be super random.
Yes, it's just a chance thing whether it works or not. Yeah.
And then there are others who say, and I do believe that we probably get better there too with the microbiome and nutrition, as in like changing nutrition, making sure the microbiome is healthy, whatever that means for a healthy dog. But we know serotonin is being produced in the gut as well, and it influences massively the brain function. So nutrition and microbiome, I think, would be another more organic way of dealing with anxiety. And then generally, like just getting the dog really super, super healthy in terms of exercise, physical exercise.
Activity.
I would argue, activity. I would argue most dogs.
It's amazing how well that works when we actually go use that.
It's amazing.
But when I buy the dog for my own emotional aspects versus satisfying them physically, we might have some problems that come up from that.
Yeah, and we talk about this and like, physical exercise, and we understand it's good for us too. But I think most people don't understand how much actually means for a dog. It's just not the walk around the block.
No.
And it might be the walk around the block if you have a dog that is peace out, like super chill and doesn't have any problems. But a dog that has problems needs a lot more.
Yeah.
And you got to invest that.
Yep, for sure. The shifting gears a little bit, but staying in the science world, it was interesting because, obviously I've shared science and detection for a long time now. I've even participated in various research projects within detection dog community. And it was something that someone had said to me that that kind of dawned on me, which I thought had some significant truth to it, which was there's a lot of race to publish papers and to justify whether it be grant money or a thesis or a doctorate challenge or what have you. That's all to get this. And the checks and balances that system used to be your peer review. But and I'm super limited in this, but from what I see in my own experience, which I can speak of, is peer review doesn't even seem to be that hard anymore. It's kind of like, and again, strictly off my own opinion, I'll do your peer review or be part of that. Just also make sure you hook a brother up when my paper comes through there. Because have you seen similar things in that world when it comes to what I see as a layman in that world is things get published and there's such sometimes low data numbers or it's hyper specific or even still confirmation bias by the researcher is still gleaming right through all of this stuff.
Yeah.
What is your opinion or experience that you see? Because this is you read it even way more than I do. So what do you see?
Well, I can tell you like the insights, especially from like my own experience when I was the one peer reviewing data.
Yeah.
And peer review, that word or phrase or whatever, ever since science has become so accessible to the public, peer review has become the standard quality measure or whatever. And I don't think it's ever been, but it's probably gotten worse. But people have no idea what that really means.
Yeah.
I think there's
there's a room full of doctors that are like, we got the paper here, let's review it.
Yes.
No, damn, that's horrible. No.
Yes.
Yeah.
It's not like that. So what's likely going to happen, so someone submits a paper to a journal. The journal itself is already ranked by quality, and that basically you have these big journals, Nature, Cell, right, like Journal of Medicine. publishing there is really, really hard. The journal itself has some requirements. You have to have certain controls in place, as in like there's this many experiments that need to be done in animals to prove this and this and this, right? So like publishing in Nature is really hard. You're never going to publish in Nature without like really thorough animal models, for example. So just to get into the first barrier, and then they accept your paper and it needs to go through the peer review process. And then they randomly select other research groups or PIs, leaders of research groups that work in a similar field, and they send out an email. And like, I just got an email the other day, and I haven't been in academia for so long. Would you please, from the Egyptian something journal, would you please peer review this journal? I'm like, I haven't been in academia for so long. How do you even get my email?
Yeah.
Anyways, so they send out the email, and then you say, okay, yes, I peer review. And it's supposed to be random. But the more you work in the niche, the less random it gets, because there are not that many people who will peer review your data. And then what happens? So the PI gets it and says yes. And he mainly says yes because eventually he needs someone else to peer review. So you can't say no, but they don't want to do it. So what happens?
I scratch your back, you scratch mine.
Right.
Yeah.
So then the PI sends an email to his postdocs, which then back then was me, and say, can you please peer review this paper? So the postdoc doesn't want to do it either, but the postdoc needs something from the PI. And so kind of, and what I would be doing is, because it takes time to fully read a paper and understand and give constructive feedback. And you don't really allow to do this during your own work hours. So you do it after work on the weekends. So you already go in with like a little bit of a grudge. Unless you're like super fresh in the field and you're like, I want to impress someone. And then you're like, oh yeah, I'm going to do this as a volunteer. But eventually you're like, I don't volunteer anymore. And then you kind of look for the big pillars, right? Is there some level of control? Does it make sense? You don't really read the discussion as much because it doesn't really matter what this researcher thinks about the results. You kind of read it as in like, is that researcher making too broad of a claim? You look into some of like other statistics. Do they make sense? Are there any typos in the figures? And is the setup in the hypothesis, does that make sense, right? But even though you might work in the same field, you're still not an expert for that particular molecule or protein or research project. So a lot of those things you would have to read up on, which you definitely don't do. So you kind of just go with like the general understanding of the topic, and you kind of cross off like certain things like, okay, we can pass it. And then you sometimes request some things here. The researchers need to explain this a little bit more, or that data is not in there, they need to put it in there. And then you send it back, then they do it, and then it's getting published. And sometimes they get rejected. I don't know. It happens still a lot for smaller papers, but like the rejection usually is this thing is completely off. And some of the papers that are being published, I do wonder, like, why have they not gotten rejected?
Yeah.
But then the next thing to look at is what journal have they been published in. And if it's a smaller journal, they're more likely to let things go, right? And there has been a study that got published, or maybe it was just an article. It might have been just an article in like a scientific journal. But someone wanted to test how rigorous that is, and he made up the study completely. Data made up, maybe even the university made up in some country. The researcher's name were made up, and it got published. Like it got accepted to be published. Obviously, it didn't get published.
Yeah.
And like that's the level of like depending on who is peer reviewing, and if you have someone who's really eager, you get a good peer review. But it's not always the case.
I see that a lot with the animal side of things, right? Because like you said, the more niche it is, and I've seen that even within my super niche world of detection, I can probably name on both my hands the total number of scientists who do the vast majority of the research in detection dogs. And so it's the same names a lot of times. And there's nothing wrong with that part of it, but it just shows you how small it is.
Right.
Because it's the same names doing variations of various studies. And I then zoom out another level out, dog behavior side of it. The number is only going to be so much bigger because, again, it's still not a big topic. It's not like medical research on humans as opposed to what we're doing with dogs. So then, in that case, tell me if I'm wrong, is it a lot of the same names that are in the behavioral side of things too? Same ones publishing, which then means we're in an echo chamber, in a sense. And it's literally only slightly more valuable than the paper it's published on. Mm-hmm. Because, and this is the hardest part that, from the world I come from on the practitioner professional side of it, is especially in my early ages of my career, we did not like the science world very much at all, because our thought process was, yeah, you got this information in your research lab and that was great, but that's not the world I live in. Mm-hmm. I live in this world here, and you didn't account for all these things. Mm-hmm. And as I got more into that world of being the conduit between the two sides, I started realizing that the scientist side were like, no, we weren't trying to say this really works over here. We are saying we were looking at this specific thing, we see the specific thing, and it's under these conditions with this many dogs. But the consumers of that information run around and go, it proves my point. Yes. And then the standard becomes, well, it's because it's been published in a paper means it's holier than thou.
Yes.
So again, just from my own experiences, the more we get information from those who have a body of work with the animals doing it here, being highly collaborative with the other side studying it, what I see is it's gotten a lot better. I can say this, but these worlds need to meld more, and the researcher or doctor whoever who's been doing the research needs to go spend 3 years with that trainer and handler and go touch a dog. Yeah, do the 500 dogs that handler or that trainer has done over the next couple of years.
Yeah,
and then. And I'm good with them coming at it with a critical eye sometimes, because I've been around some amazing researchers and who will go, let me ask a question, why this? And I'll give you a specific example. Dr. Brian Hare, who studies nothing but cognition, mm-hmm. and he's an evolutionary anthropologist, so not even a dog guy by definition in that sense, looked at detection from my world and goes, why do you guys have them sit? Why is sit the indication that you guys chose? Like, what was the reason behind that? I don't know. This is what we were told to do. Because back when I first got into it, everything was scratch alert. Mm. So the scratch indication was supernatural for dogs. Like you didn't have, I mean, I can't say you didn't, but the number of false responses through scratch behavior was lower in comparison to this behavior of sit. Mm-hmm. And his looking at it was, why did you guys pick sit? And of course, I couldn't give him a good reason why, other than that's what we were told to go do. And I was told to shut up and color and make it happen, right? And we did it. His question is, well, sit is a trained behavior. You also use sit more than just in detection. You use it in your obedience. You use it for it to communicate. You'll set your house and go, hey, sit. And it was funny these were very similar arguments defense attorneys would bring up in court to handlers about, well, how do I know your dog was really doing this? How do I know your dog just didn't want its reward by offering a sit? Because do you ever make your dog sit for a toy at home or a treat at home? Yep. Do you do an obedience? All these things, right? So his question was, why that when in the predatory sequence, there's better things that you can't necessarily easily cause to happen. Meaning this is where the stalking part of the predatory sequence was natural. And he says, so once a predatory animal understands that they're going to get reinforcement through this means, especially when we've done it as prey as the mechanism to teach it with, the communication aspect, the natural behavior, especially in certain breeds that we pick, stalking is really strong. They're going to do that in the presence of the stimulus, less likely to do it in the absence of the stimulus. So why aren't you guys going with a more natural freeze indication? The funny part was I was already kind of doing that, and as a handler and a trainer for years, we had so many dogs that would get to odor and lock up. And we would spend so much time making them sit and getting them to sit and doing all these things.
Don't do that natural behavior.
And then now I laugh in the sense of the pointing breed has become much more popular in the detection dog world, and they naturally do it. But one of our biggest government agencies that uses pointers still wants to make them sit. and they go through crazy contraptions like an inverted wall, whacking the back of the legs to get him to sit, all these different things they come up with to get a damn pointer to sit when the pointer wants to point. So why are we fighting, back to his comment, why are you fighting genetics that are going to be more true and more honest versus some subjective thing that somebody way back in the late 80s, early 90s said, well, sit's going to be the thing since we don't want to keep scratching cars like they used to. So this is because this was the repercussion of not necessarily thinking it all the way through. And this is the side where we had a practitioner going, well, I can't scratch anymore. I make a dog sit all day long. Let's go this route. And then somebody with a scientific background coming in and going, I can see, but why not this? And was kind of already been naturally happening. We're still very distant in the numbers, but the freeze indication is becoming more popular, more utilized, but it's not perfect either. I mean, can you get a dog to still freeze as a response, especially once they learn it operantly? Of course. The difference that I see occur is when there's stimulus there's different things happening to the dog's body when there's stimulus present. Like there's more rigid muscle tone. There's breathing changes that occur. There's all these other things. When it's a little bit of BS or just investigatory, they're kind of like smelling it. Their bodies may be still, and a unknowing handler or a new handler may perceive this behavior as, oh, that's the indication, because it is versus something that's very demonstrative. A dog has to sit. But the other real world application is when you're in the real world, the sitting function becomes sometimes difficult depending on the environment you're in, where stalking the behavior or the stalking behavior, the freeze, is doable in a lot more conditions regardless of what's kind of in the environment. So it was kind of I got sidetracked there, but it was just kind of cool to see where I could give an instance where a scientist who put themselves in the world of the dog trainers and dog handlers asked some good relevant questions, allowed us to give feedback. Well, this is why, this is how, and then came back with us with like, why not try this? Yeah. See what this does. And I think the more we do that, the more we try to integrate those worlds together, get the researcher out of the lab, get the practitioner out of the world and into the lab a little bit so they can understand some of the whys. Why should we have sometimes strict data points to go by? Why should we have certain controls in place versus just throwing out my odor and going, this is easy. There's no science in detection. You just throw the odor out, your dog will find it. So, and I know it applies to a lot of other things. What would you envision as a really optimal system, or where would you hope that these sides come to?
Oh, that's a good question. Yeah. I think it's very tough because, like, when you start a research project, or even just if you dabble in your training room, you kind of start out ideally with like a certain hypothesis. And for as long as we have the hypothesis that one training method is better than the other, we're always going to go the wrong direction. And for that to change, I think we'll have to, like, my ideal setup, if I had, control over everything and I had endless money and everyone would want to help, the ideal setup would be to have a bunch of litters, let's say 1,000 litters of different breeds, like good representation. And for some reasons, we can also have a bunch of trainers that are cloned, or just say, okay, let's do 100 litters in a row so that this one trainer can train them all throughout the first 2 years.
Because there's so much diversity in humans as there are in dogs. Yep.
Yes. And then the trainer trains half of them balanced and half of them force-free, for example. And then kind of find welfare measurements to see over a long period of time, not just like in the moment of here I'm using the leash pressure and the dog seems stressed. That we would obviously observe and take note of it. But what we really want to do is like 2 months later and 3 months later and 4 months later, how's the dog doing in terms of all these signs of welfare? And And that would have to happen without the trainer being a different person. So it's obviously, that makes it already hard. But the dog itself has to be his or her own control through this longitudinal study before, during training, and after training. And can you then tell the difference? And you probably will not be able to tell the difference by training method, but by temperament. And then within the same training method, there will be dogs that succeed and fail because of a certain temperament. And then you would probably get closer to the true elements of what welfare means for dogs, which is, control, predictability of certain things, the pace of training. And that would kind of crystallize the elements that we can't really do right now with the setup we have.
Yeah.
Especially, like, a good training paper should have a boring ass title, and no one should understand what this is about, because then you know that these researchers didn't come in with the preconception of what they want to try to say. But if it says something training method and welfare of the dog and maybe even then you already know.
Yeah.
You already know, because there's no way that in this paper you will be able to understand the welfare of these dogs. The way they measure it is like horrendous. Or efficiency, like you can have efficacy, like you said. Efficacy is like how this works in that training setup. It is as artificial as it can be. And efficiency would be how would it work in the real world. And that part is missing. But you can't use efficiency in your title and welfare in your title. And when I see this already, it's like, this is clickbait. This is BuzzFeed 101 in science. And we don't want that. So
this episode of Canines Talking Sense is brought to you by dogbase.co, the all-in-one platform for working dog professionals, from training logs to certifications, deployments, medical, overall performance tracking. Dogbase keeps everything organized and accessible in one place. No more notebooks or scattered spreadsheets, whether you're running detection dogs, patrol dogs, search and rescue, nose work, scent work, whatever it is, Dogbase has a package that fits your program. And it's completely customizable and it grows with you. Go check out dogbase.co today and streamline your training program. We personally use this here at Ford Canine. It is a wonderful application, great for logging everything you could ever want, especially when it comes to detection work. So those of you in nose work and scent work, go check it out.
We don't want to turn research papers into social media clickbait titles.
And that's what's happening.
And that's exactly what's happened. I mean, there was one, I think Natalie and I saw one. It was something about the breeds, right? Predictability of breeds. Yeah, so they were saying, oh, if the breed is this, then this is what's going to happen. And man, did that, like, the media got a hold of that, like, oh, barking isn't necessarily a thing, it's this. And it was just, and I'm really butchering it, but I remember, gosh, it was like months of people going crazy on that one. And then the other one that Dr. Clive Wynn and Ivan did, we got everybody spun up because of the things of that nature. And it's tough, but the bigger point, which I totally agree with you 100%, it's happening, and I don't want it to keep happening, where titles of research are clickbait.
Yeah.
And because, again, everything's gone digital, so the paper becoming more valid means more views and downloads it gets. And the sexier the title is, the more you get, which doesn't necessarily means it's a good thing. It just means it got clicked more.
Yes.
Because we don't know if they read it. They just clicked on it. Maybe they clicked on it, opened it, read the first paragraph, and I was like, screw this. I do that to half of them.
Right.
You know, I'm like, I'm like, where's the cliff notes? Where's the abstract? Yeah. Okay, bullshit. Now move on. Or, I like that. I'll read the whole thing now.
Yeah.
So it doesn't really solve anything. But you're right. I do feel it has to be something super boring as a title, but just barely interesting enough that to get some of the readers into it, to give it some more value to it. But to move it into a different direction, like I started off with puppies, one of the first things I wanted to kind of get into, because as you know, we do cognition, and there was a lot of things that I've learned about the development of the brain in that age range of, I'll do from the typical age people get them, 8 weeks to 16-week time frame. What would you want to pass on to people, or what's break it down even smaller, 8 to 10 weeks. What is happening in the dog's brain? What should we be aware of? What should we capitalize on if we're going to be teaching this dog a skill? And I'll make it even easier in the sense of, I want to teach my puppy detection. What's a pro and potentially a con in that first 2 weeks, 8 to 10 weeks? What's happening in the dog's brain, and what should I be aware of?
Yeah, I mean, It's a puppy. So that itself should say already a lot of things. It's like a baby.
Yeah.
And the way an adult dog learns and a puppy learns is very different. They both learn. And the puppy learns more and faster. But not the way we think it should happen when we think about learning. When we think about learning, we think about obedience or for detection, targeting a certain way, finding something, going after the decoy the right way, biting this leg and not that leg. It's a very goal-oriented kind of learning that comes later in life. It comes probably after it's 1 year old. Before that, it's very much for the dog's brain to learn what keeps me alive in the most simple terms. How good do I get more of what I like, and how do I get less of what I don't like? And what do I do in between? And that's basically the brain. And how the brain does that, as soon as the puppy is born, or when you pick the puppy up, the brain is like, I mean, we say it all the time, it's like a sponge. But what that really means is the neurons, the single millions of neurons and the synapses, they're all like, hang on to everything they can get a hold on. It's like, I'm going to make a connection with you. And it's like, oh, the vacuum means scary. I'm going to make a connection. Oh, wait, the vacuum means a treat. I'm going to make a connection too. And it's like this all the time, because the puppy cannot afford to miss out on something that could potentially save your life later on. So everything could become an association. Everything could become something that needs to be remembered. So that's good in the way that, whatever you need, like, it's good to have a vision. I think a lot of people, they get a puppy and then they figure it out. And I'm a little bit like that, but fortunately I'm surrounded by people who have the experience. Sure. So they kind of stop me before I go down the wrong path. But it's good to have a vision. It's like, and what kind of setting do you need your dog to operate in, whether it's a pet dog or detection or whatever? What do you need your dog to find normal? Very important. And what do you need your dog to be okay with in general? And then you kind of construct these things. It's not about goal-oriented, go into a sit, down, a stand learning. It's about be okay in this kind of setting.
Yeah.
So that all these neurons can make the right connections, like this setting, I'm hearing these kind of chaotic sounds, I'm hearing traffic sounds, and I'm having fun. And then the neurons are like reward, noise, all that. Okay. What we need to understand, though, is because as fast as they can make these connections, that can also be forgotten really fast. So the threshold for what we call long-term potentiation, meaning these connections going long-term memory, for the first connections to be made, the threshold is very low.
Okay.
They don't need a lot of signal to make these connections. Later on, when you have a dog that is adult, sometimes like, oh, could you please learn this? Like, how many treats do I have to shove in your face for you to learn this is the position, right? It takes longer. But then once it clicks, it clicks. For the puppy, it's the opposite. Super fast, but also goes away. And again, it's the brain saying, well, we got it. Let's see if it's still important tomorrow and the day after and the day after. Because we just want to learn what's important. So we forget quickly, too. And that happens until 4 months.
Okay.
This quick going on connections, and then what we call pruning. So the brain is kind of like a luscious tree with all these connections and neurons, right? And eventually the brain is like, okay, I think I get it. Now let's cut off what we don't need anymore and shapes kind of the most important connections. So then at that time, 6-ish months, 4-6 months, the scaffold is there. It's like, okay, I think I got who I am a little bit, what's going on, what's kind of like why I'm here, who to follow, who not to follow. And then that continues. And then later, after 1 year old or 6 months, 7 months, depending on how fast the puppy develops, that's when learning turns from the other thing, maybe going back, puppies are also, like, they fire dopamine all the time, part of learning. Yep. It's like, whoa, I'm excited to be alive. Whoa, I'm excited to go in this corner and sniff that little leaf that I just, right? And then, oh my God, there is someone coming in. So dopamine is firing all the time, and it's curiosity driven. It's like everything new, their drive on
Oh, so it's like a person on a phone going like this, scrolling all the time.
Oh my God, yes.
There you go.
They live the TikTok life.
Yes, they're living the TikTok. They're scrolling like hell, ooh, that scares the crap out of me, though. That's cool. I like that. Yes, they're constantly conflicted too, right?
Yes. Yes, all the time, bouncing back, and the attention span is the same too.
We're regressing. We're becoming like puppies.
Become like
there
that,
we
yes.
go. Now I'm getting it.
That's probably the bottom line of this episode.
I've been trying so hard to get Pat Nolan back on. I've had him on before because we want to talk about this very thing with puppies, and he had shared how starting puppies in detection was basically a good thing to do. And I had beliefs both ways, and now as I'm raising a puppy, I'm doing some things with the puppy. I also equate it, as I finish out the statement, it's when you're teaching kids languages, they learn multiple languages way better when they're younger. If you teach, a kid from, let's say, I don't know, I'm just going to say number 5 years old, multiple languages, they can speak multiple languages even without accent, when they're switching back and forth, versus us learning it when we're 16, 17, going through high school, and we're starting to learn it. Like you said, I think our brains are so full of other stuff that it's hard to do it. But when you're younger and you're just absorbing all these things, it becomes easier. So kind of as Pat and I've had conversations about this, it's the reason why he likes to do the odor work is and I'm probably going to butcher it a little bit, but it's teaching the dog the vocabulary of detection at a young age. And in some cases, the ability to remember that odor better when you formalize a training once they're older. Does that seem like a logical way about going about it? Knowing that what I had to also caveat that with sometimes with people is because I had to tell people, like, I agree with Pat. My own experiences tell me the same things. I will raise up, like I'm doing right now. I'm literally we're maybe 10 sessions in, and I already have my puppy locating electronic media on the pipe wall. And he can find it. He can hold position. He's doing all the things. And he's doing it quite well without any of our other formalized, like I haven't done a box with him at all. Natalie did one session with 2 pipes with him. The rest has been searching it on a brick wall, searching it on a pipe wall, searching for it in the normal environment. And he's got it pretty decently. But when the average person sees to get their new puppy, they want to do that too. And I have to say to them, you're not Pat Nolan. You're not me. And what I'm fearful of them for is because what you just brought up, the puppy's brain is so new and taking in so many things, you without the experience may not know what the road ahead is like. Where Pat for sure, and what I look at ahead as I'm doing some of the things is what are the 3 steps ahead that might be affected by what I'm doing right now. Where the person who's newer got a puppy is like, I want to do this thing with my puppy. They may not be paying attention to, well, this can also happen based on what you did. And when you finally realize it, just because you're not a trainer in that, or don't have the depth of experience I'm on my 30 years. I think Pat's on his 50th year of doing this. You learn from all the mistakes that we made. So what I try to do is just have them you could do this, but try to avoid the pitfalls. And maybe because your experience isn't there yet, let's wait a little bit longer till your dog's a little bit more resilient to not have I call it like a scratch for those that are old enough, what a record was, a vinyl record. When you get a scratch on a record,
yes,
every time it hits that spot, it's like, so I don't want you, because you can buff that record as best you can so it tries to play as good, but that scratch will show itself from time to time. I just don't want people to scratch the record on the puppy, and it can be safer to wait until the record's harder to scratch, for lack of a better term, and still get the same goal accomplished. But the trainer in me loves the fact that I'm teaching my child multiple languages right now because his brain is so easy and able to do that. What do you advise people when it comes to just in general when training puppies? Because what I want to do is I want to segue this as we talk into the fear period stuff, because that's another thing. So kind of talk about the risks, and then you can kind of lead it into the fear period, like what we should be paying attention to. What are some of the risks that are involved in teaching and training certain things for a puppy?
So as fast a puppy can learn the things you wanted to learn, and it needs kind of the exposure in the way that it kind of sticks. And like I said, the memories made are very fragile, and puppies sleep so much because it helps stabilize memories, and because there's so much coming in every single day, they sleep a lot. But it can backfire just the same way, just as fast. And coming back from when it really backfires is really hard because, again, we have to understand why the puppy is learning fast, not just celebrating, hey, I have this super smart puppy, but why? Because it needs to understand the context of the world as fast as possible to guarantee survival. And ultimately, the goal is, again, seek more of what you like, but particularly avoid anything that could be dangerous. And we're not living in a world where our dogs have to run away from a lion, but it doesn't mean that the stress response isn't there and kind of signaling danger. And because the memories are fragile and there's still the emotional system is fragile. Most importantly, and that's why a lot of things can backfire. The cortical structures, so the ones that are really important for inhibition and impulse control, they develop the last. So it doesn't happen fully until they're a year old, probably 6-7 months, maybe a little bit older. That's when they start to reason as much as they can, right? Now, you can circumvent it with a lot of skill in your handling and being very playful and making this almost always like a success event with tiny little stress inoculations, which really requires a skilled handler. But if you get to push too hard because you get too confident that your puppy can do it and your puppy has one or two failures or learns errors and can't handle it well, then the puppy is like, well, let's just make sure that we never get into the situation again because this doesn't seem to help our situation as growing up as a safe puppy. Because safety is ultimately kind of like the big theme for a puppy at the beginning. And then you have a dog who doesn't want to do the work anymore, not as rigorous anymore. And then you spend a lot of time convincing them, oh, no, you can do it. And you're like, you good. And if you have a cranked up puppy, this might be easier. But if you have a dog that is maybe a little fearful in the stage where it gets more skeptical, because when reasoning comes in, then it's also like, are you sure that you're good for me? It's like, I liked you and I hung out with you, but somehow I don't like you anymore, right? It's when they start to become a different person a little bit. And when you happen to push too hard in that phase, then again, you can have a puppy that is making the memories of like, this was not cool. And then you have a puppy that is maybe very emotional about this as well and remembers that for a long time.
What are fear periods and how predictable are they? Is it because I know Natalie and I have had this conversation a few times and just through our years of experience doing it, it's not 100. There is no like, it's always this week to this week. It varies, but it is always from 6 months and under typically. And it seems like, I think you kind of covered it too, but certain things definitely stick more if a certain experience happens, which is weird because when it first happens, it doesn't even seem like it's that big a deal. But then from that point on, that's a big deal. So what should somebody look for when raising a puppy? What are kind of predictable things that you can be paying attention to know that you might be going into or you could be in a fear period?
It's a little bit boring language from Michael Ellis too here. It's kind of like looking for what the dog pays attention to. And at the beginning, for a puppy who has an attention span of a mosquito, basically, if the puppy really pays attention to something for longer, is an indication that either it's heightened curiosity in a good way, but also in the bad way, right? And then obviously just general body language, but it can change. It can change so quickly within 1 week or within 1 day whether or not the puppy is skeptical or scared of something. But ultimately, it's like approach avoidance behaviors, whatever that means for the puppy, right? That can be very different. My pup, Ollie, he has a little bit of an anger issue. So his avoidance behavior is actually approaching and wanting to beat up whatever made he's basically,
I'm gonna get you before you get me, motherfucker.
Exactly. He's mad at you that you made him scared. So knowing that is very helpful because then you know, okay, you're actually uncomfortable, but you're still approaching because you think you kind of handle the situation that way. Most puppies, I would say, they probably try to avoid it simply. And I think that's very hard for some people to accept that. You know, it's better to just not make a big deal out of it and kind of just see what happens next day. And like if it's still the same the day after or the week after, and just kind of again, work with the brain and not against it. Work with the brain. A puppy has a small attention span. Yes, it gets super scared of this moment, but then just be the opposite the other moment.
Be normal with it.
Be normal, yeah. And either, make it not a big deal, or if it is a big deal, then be a positive big deal.
Yeah.
Right?
What's the thing, Michael shared it on social media, I forget it, is clown on a bicycle.
Oh, yes.
what was that one again? I forget.
Well, so like people think they like kind of have this super stable dog at some point, and like they're socialized and conditioned to all the things that the dog is being exposed to on a regular basis, right? And then I think in the context that he's explaining it is, okay, like the dog is super stable, and then a clown on the bicycle comes by and your dog loses his or her shit. And people are like, no, we're like, why are you doing this? You're so stable. It's like, it's a
clown on a bicycle.
It's like, dude, I've never seen that before.
Yes.
And
when is he ever going to see a clown on a bicycle ever again? And then, I got it now, yeah.
And of course the dog is going to react.
I'm probably going to react if I see I'm just saying, yeah.
Serious. And like, we expect them to be fine with everything else just because we think we crossed off everything. We might have, but we have to still leave some wiggle room for like novelty is the key here. Novelty is something that throws off everyone. Yeah. Every animal and every creature in this world is being thrown off by novelty. Yeah. And some dogs are like, they recognize us like, oh, weird, and then they go on their way. And others, they want to kill it.
Yep. My little puppy's kind of unique. As he goes in different environments, certain environments, he bebops around and he's super good with things. And then randomly he sees something. And it's funny because you can see his brain being in conflict. I want to check that thing out. I was just in Petco yesterday, and they had a big lamb chop stuffed animal, the little sheep, for those that don't know, lamb chop, the sheep, the character. He sees it, and he is like, that's weird. And so he leans out really far, and he's like trying to sniff it, but that's a weird looking thing. So what... And just with the years I've been doing this, I just kind of let him go through the experience of it. And then when he kind of chilled it, that I took it when he wasn't paying attention, I took it out, like took it with me a little bit. He's like, "Oh, what do you have? Okay, where do you want to check out lamb chop now?" And then it kind of turned it. Then it turned into he won't let go of lamb chop. So I had to like kind of like, okay, you gotta let go of lamb chop now, so I can put it back on the shelf. But I'll see that in him at various times right now. Like the thing that I take away is his recovery time's fast. Like he like, ooh, what's this? But again, like you said earlier, I act very normal with it, and I just let him kind of go through the experience of it. I don't try to stimulate the object, while he's in that, what is this thing? I kind of wait till he's done checking it out or shifts focus to something else. And then I maybe go play with it, because especially with something like lamb chop, he can go play with it. Or sometimes once he disengages, he kind of gets comfortable, that'll reinforce him being comfortable.
Right.
Like I'll just kind of play with him a little bit or do something with him. But it's funny because Natalie and I remember, so my dog Ammo is now 4 years old, was kind of a little bit like that too. He was kind of like Ollie a little bit. He'd get pissed off at things that he didn't like. He'd like, what's that? And we had this funniest thing, like there's all these Halloween decorations that year, all these things that moved around didn't bother him. It was a leather glove hanging on a shelf, and he was ready to murder us. He's like, yes. I don't know what that thing is. And so her and I always laughed at that leather, like of all the examples to show creature that shakes and wiggles and does nothing. A leather glove dangling, weird, which is again why I try to tell people when they're raising puppies in detection, you're going to go places, you're going to do stuff, you're going to see your dog do well, but all of a sudden, if you just the weirdest place you stuck the odor because your dog was doing, you're the area you have to put odor in, all of a sudden that experience leads into a negative. You've now inadvertently connected this odor or detection in general to a stressful experience. And that could be pretty strong consequences to the bigger picture of you having a detection dog. So if you don't really know or have a good grasp of how to balance out these stressors that are happening, and like you said, the dog's brain going through, I don't know what this is, I'm going to try it out. Is it good? Is it bad? And if we put a job at the same time to that we really expect the dog to do, because I want to be a detection dog handler, I'm going to get this puppy, I'm going to raise it right, you could absolutely ruin it. So that's why maybe I'm being what they call like a hover parent, and I'm like, no, just wait till they're older, which I've backed off a little bit, because sometimes I got to let people just fall on their face and then learn the hard way. And I have to respect that because this guy has done that more than a few times. So I've listened to the old trainers tell me, oh, don't do this, don't do that. I'm like, yeah, shut up. And then go do that and go like, no, there might have been a good reason why they told me not to do that. So some of it I got to let happen. I try to share through just experience. There's pros and cons to what you're doing, and there's risks to this. If you want to get the best optimal chance to turn into what you want, and you're not well versed as an educator or trainer in this, wait till the dog is more resilient and then teach it later on. You're not going to lose the big difference between raising a puppy to starting detection older. Is it a huge difference?
Yeah.
It does make things a little bit easier. I totally agree with Pat on it teaches the vocabulary of it really well. That's super relevant and important. But what I see is with the advent of social media and YouTube videos and all the things that people can access and watch and do, they want to do what they see, like I said, like not only just Pat and myself, Robin Grubel, Tobias, all these ones that do puppies, and all extremely well-talented trainers who do it. Everybody wants to be them. Mm-hmm. And a lot of us who are in that category, we've also selected our puppies a certain way. Which goes into the genetic component of this, and the genetics is a major player. If I'm not speaking out of turn, into that brain aspect and how the chemistry is, and all of these things. Is the safe period basically once you get past the 16 week, or you get close to, let's say, 5-6 months? Are we pretty safe at that point, more or less, as far as like they've had enough life experience that the brain has taken in enough data? Or is it still pretty? It's still like handling fine china at that point. Are we safer or are we less?
Well, we're probably safer than before, but probably still not super safe. I mean, ultimately, what we want is what you said. Like, if there's something happening that wasn't planned, and especially if you have a working dog and like working in real life, there's always going to be something that is not going to be planned. Mm-hmm. And how can the dog bounce back from that? And again, that feeds into this negative feedback loop of my stress response is active and now I'm going to turn it off again. Mm-hmm. And that really doesn't happen until later. That doesn't happen until after 6 months, up until 12 months or whatever. Like, older dogs take a little longer. No, mm-hmm. Bigger dogs take a little longer. And then also how willing the dog is to override it with other motivations.
Correct. Yep.
And if you have a really cranked up dog, you probably, can probably override this much faster or quicker than the dog that is.
No, it's a good, because I share that a lot. I just called it drive over stress.
Right.
If the dog had enough drive, the drive could carry it over some of the stressors that's in its life. Yeah. If the dog wasn't as driven, stress is going to override the drive, and therefore the stressors are always going to interfere or crop their head up at some point more often. What I also find super interesting, I'm curious, it's your thought on this. So I think there's so much to learn from the hunting dog community because their washout rate of pups is much lower than, let's say, traditional the working dog worlds that we come from. But they use dogs to train each other way more than we do. They take the experienced dog out, let the young pups learn from them, and all they're really, when you talk to a lot of them, is what they're looking for is, can the pups that don't keep up, or the pups that the drive aspect isn't there, are usually the ones that don't make it. But it's a low number compared to that. What is happening when I'm using a adult to teach a puppy? And because I've noticed too, if a puppy who probably was nervous in this room by itself, but then there's another dog in here and they're not bothered by it, then they're like, I didn't care about that thing now because I see this dog didn't care about it. That dog sniffed it. Okay, I'll go sniff it. What's happening there? What's going on with our dogs like that?
So the requirements probably is to have the right social dynamic, so the younger dogs understand to follow one way or another the older dogs. I had, like, as an example, where this sometimes doesn't work is when I had my first Mal, Anya, and she was a puppy and she was very reactive. I was like, I'm just going to take my Harvey, my super chill dog, on walks, and then she will see she doesn't need to react, and it worked the other way around. Harvey then started to react because he's an empath.
Yeah.
And he is like, I don't like this energy. I can't eliminate her, so I might as well eliminate then the other dog, and we kind of gang up.
Work together.
Yeah. So, but it's because her energy, her nervous energy, was overriding his calmness, and because he was more sensitive. But if you have an established dog that knows is goal oriented in his or her work, then the others naturally will follow, right? And even now with Ollie, right, when I see Harvey's walking with him and Ollie, and Harvey goes sniff somewhere, he goes there and it's like,
Yep,
what are you sniffing there? Like,
Mm-hmm.
let me check that out. And it's not because he knows what he's doing. He's just like, I'm following because if you find this interesting, I might. And by definition, the behavior is the same too. Go over, sniff, right? So they mimic the behavior in order to understand the potentially the motivation of like, what am I seeking out here? And that mimicking that behavior becomes then operant or like a rewarded behavior once they kind of go more into the work itself. And I would argue, thinking about it, they don't get from the older dogs punished for not doing the right behavior. They're just getting rewarded by association doing the right behavior, right? So it's a little less of like pressure to perform a certain thing and just be with the other dogs, and you naturally mimic what they're doing. And then once it's kind of like the vocabulary what you just said with the detection, right? But in a very natural setting.
Yeah.
In the driven setting. And the older ones, because they're older, right, they are like, well, I keep saying they're goal driven. They have a goal. And the younger ones, they're not there yet because they don't understand the goal. But they're curiosity driven. So they're curious what the older one's doing. And so it chains us together. It's, in a way, it's a really beautiful way of learning.
Yeah.
I would like to learn things like that.
For sure. What in the dogs, because dogs are very olfaction oriented, how much of their brain is truly driven by olfaction compared to visual?
That's a good question. A lot of it is olfaction driven. The olfactory bulb, like the part of the brain that is like a knob in front that we don't have, is directly linked to the limbic system, meaning to the emotions. It bypasses any kind of filtering that would come with visual system or with the auditory system, where through the attention and focus, the brain will filter out, you don't need to worry about this, don't listen to that, don't listen to the nagging of your owner, right? Just ignore the commands. But the olfactory system doesn't work like that. It's kind of directly linked. It's super fast, which makes sense. It directly links to the periaqueductal gray, which is a part in the brainstem, like super conserved area, and that harbors the sequences of orient, attack, stalk, like the whole predatory sequence. That makes sense, right? As soon as you get a whiff of your prey, your dinner, you gotta start orienting or whatever. You can't like filter out, is this important or not? A couple years ago, I don't know if you saw that research, they showed these, they call it highways. So some areas in the brain some neurons have very long axons. It's sort of like a highway. Huge, thick myelination, so it's like super fast, so they have to travel a long way. And what they found is that in the back part of the brain, there is actually a connection between the visual system and the olfactory system from the dog. And they were like, maybe they are like a lot more connected than we think it was. Now, I don't know, you know probably better than I do, but a dog searching at daylight versus the dog really being truly blinded, like not just low light because they can see pretty well, but like how different is their search behavior or efficiency? Because I do think that my other theory, and I have no data to back this up, but my other theory is we are very visually driven, and we raise our dogs to be visually driven. And because the brain is so plastic, it learns to also orient based on visuals, which I don't think would happen without our influences.
It's funny you say that because Brian Hare from the cognition tests says, especially the way we have it set up, they're using their vision first.
Yeah.
It's a very sight-oriented aspect. And he said they use sight much more than we think, especially when they first come into an area. Though, obviously, like you're saying, because if it's natural, then their nose is probably leading them through the environment. But when we put them into our environment, visual is the assessment along with olfaction. But he says, again, this is why the cognition tests work kind of the way they do, is it's a very visually driven aspect that helps them make decisions. And he says they use their eyes a lot more than we think they do, and the tests kind of show a lot of that. And I found that to be highly accurate. But at the same time, I come from the world where we make them use their nose quite a bit, and I thought that was super interesting that we always talk about them using their nose. And I would say, and you can tell me if I'm wrong, but isn't their brain kind of wired to look for anomalies through olfaction? Like, what doesn't belong here, or what is the strongest thing? And that's actually nose driven.
Yeah, I think so. I don't know what comes first, and it might be like such a tiny little time difference that we wouldn't know. But yeah, the contrast in anything kind of like is the first attention grabber. So, but I do think that could also be true for visuals. Something that in that moment, like for example, if I imagine going into a room with my dog and there's a squirrel hiding somewhere, if that squirrel maybe moves, then it will be visually first before the olfaction. But if it doesn't move, I think then everything stays kind of the same, because they don't have color vision. I mean, how else would they? Maybe we go from there. They don't have color vision. It's all kind of shades of blue and yellow. And unless something, and I tell this all my students, like, wear a monochromatic glass for 2 hours and then tell me what you pay attention to. Because what you think you pay attention to is not what your dog pays attention to. The only thing you're going to pay attention to is what moves, right? And I think it's the same there. And if nothing moves, I think the olfaction, it has to be the guiding part. Like, this over there smells different than this over there. And then what do we examine? And then they kind of combine this probably with their visuals.
What's happening in the brain for learning aspect? Because one of the things I see all the time is we want to teach dogs, but we want to teach them and drive. And what happens is we take a toy or whatever, and we get the dog spun up for it because we think it's motivation. We're using motivation to get him taught. But what's really happening to that dog who goes into, oh my God, that's my toy? Is that brain really that easy to learn, or is it, or should we take an approach of the term that was used in the SEAL teams all the time, calm breeds calm, and you can do a lot more when your brain is calmer than the excited person. And what I try to share to a lot of cops is what kind of person do you want as your backup? The guy yelling and screaming and being all there, or do you want the one who's quiet, like, you got this, I got left, you got right, let's go, kind of thing? Is that same thing kind of happening to dogs? If we get a dog super motivated, is it in an optimal learning sense because we think we're using drive, or are there other factors at play that are happening neurologically to the dog when it is in arousal or stimulated?
Well, if you need a dog that runs through glass and whatnot, then you're going to want this dog to be cranked up as much as possible, but there is no learning happening. Like there is no reasoning. That's why they kind of don't self-preservation goes out the window and all these things, right? For learning to happen, as in like learn to navigate, learn to be thoughtful about your actions, learn to still like be able to listen to what your handler tells you to do. You need arousal, but you need it to be at the optimal peak. So it's the inverted U shape that is to follow in terms of arousal, adrenaline. It's
what was it? I'll make sure I pronounce it right. Yerkes-Dodson law kind of thing. Yeah, the bell curve aspect where higher drive and high emotion is also anxiety, but also the same plane in the other direction is low. But both ends are at the same spot, which is not conducive. Where the top of the bell curve is where we kind of want it, where they're motivated, but not overly motivated. Correct. They can connect the dots, but they're not seeing dots everywhere.
Right. Yeah. Correct. Yeah, and the main reason for this is coming from neuroscience again. The brain needs a sufficient friction and stimulation for it to change. So learning, once the dog is mature, there is that's not true entirely, but for most part, there is no new neurons being made. It's only changing existing connections, weakening or strengthening. So you don't produce new neurons constantly. that means for the brain to say, like, wait a second, before I stop firing these two together, give me a good enough reason to fire something new together, which is learning, right? And the natural way for the brain to get these signals is, are you activated enough, right? Do you have focus? And is there some level of motivation involved or emotional valence, let's say? And that is enough signal then for the brain to say, okay, we should pay attention to this.
So we got to find something that they like. They like it enough to get the job done, but not like it so much that they can't control themselves.
Right.
Got it. Okay.
Because then the focus goes out the window, and as soon as you don't have focus or attention, then you don't get learning really happening. Then you get just a crackhead on.
So we want to take that radio dial, that volume dial, and turn it to the right level for that dog, because some just turning 2 notches gets them going crazy. Other ones you got to turn it like 7 notches before it's like, oh, okay, I'm paying attention to it.
Correct. Yeah.
It's super interesting, and I'll kind of wind us down with this. What is happening in a dog's brain, or what makes it? So I'll give you the example of my dog. Ammo is a possessive dog, not in a jerk kind of way, unless it's with another dog. Sometimes, like with Gamble, he would be a jerk. He'd be a bully for the thing. Other dogs, he can kind of be. Other dogs, I've seen him also be not as. It's kind of funny because with the puppy, Neo, he lets Neo kind of interact with him and takes things from him from time to time. He can also be a jerk sometimes. What's kind of happening in a brain like that when it's about possession? Because what's funny is in the absence of competition, it's there, but not to the same level as the minute I introduce another competitor into the ring, in a sense, in the space that he's got. What chemicals in the brain are making that happen?
You have a really good question. I don't know.
Yeah.
So,
but is it related to cortisol at all? Is he getting dopamine? I think he's getting dopamine from part of that chase, that like, come get this from me. Because sometimes dogs he doesn't know, like Natalie knows this too, he'll bring his toy towards them just to get them to want it and go, no, you can't have it. And so there's some kind of internal motivator there, and I don't know if it's like cortisol, dopamine, what's like going on.
Well, it's very much like kids are at a very young age, right? Like they learning to share for a human being is very important, right? But they don't understand at the beginning that not everything is not evolving around them, right? Everything is mine, and I want you to admire what I have, but I do not want you to touch it.
Yeah.
But look at it.
Yes,
like,
yes.
don't you dare to not like it.
That's exactly.
But don't touch
that
it.
almost says him to a T. Like, come look at what I got. Isn't it cool? And then he's like, see you later. Don't touch it.
Yes, and then they get mad if you don't look at it. It's like, and bark at you. So anyways, so it's a very playful way, depending on what age it is, and it doesn't turn into resource guarding,
Correct.
right?
Yeah.
But in the young age, it's a very playful way for them to explore not just boundaries, what they can and cannot do, but mostly to explore. It's a very, very intricate way of like social dynamics that they're exploring, right? And they want to share it with you, but at the same time, it's like just this conflict of growing up. At the same time, they don't want to give it up because it's theirs.
Yes.
But they kind of want to share it, but also not, right? And it goes back and forth.
That is his
back
conflict.
And forth. Yes.
Very
it's
much
a lot of
so.
conflict, yeah. And what's happening, like, I think this is part of learning too. So everything is happening there, right? I think because it's a conflict, and depending on how much then the conflict is being promoted by the human or not, it can be stressful. At the same time, it's very playful. So there's a lot of endorphins probably happening. And there's dopamine, for example, happening because it's anticipation. Are you going to come and grab it or not? And all these things together. It's interesting that the dogs are very, very different in that aspect, though, what they find valuable in terms of the interaction. It's a very social behavior, even though it doesn't feel like it because they kind of don't want to share, but it is social because without you, they couldn't do it, right? And for some, it's literally the object itself. And then for others, it's more like, I don't care about the object. I want you, I want the interaction really with you. Or like, I want the conflict with you, and I'm just using an object for that. Yeah. And others is like, no, I really want that object too. Like, I also want to carry it in the corner and hover over it and chew on it.
I'll get all three of them and I'll hover over all three of these objects.
Yes.
But I also want you to want it. But I don't want you to want it. Yeah.
Like Anya, for example, like she's a classic sock lover, and you can tell for her it's really also about the sock, because she doesn't just pick up one. She makes it a game, like how many can she carry in one haul to the yard. And it happens sometimes 5 socks. And, and it's really about the socks. But also if you come and try to get it, then she will run away. But like Ollie, he would never care about a sock unless I have the sock first and want it, and then he comes and would grab it, right? But at the same time, it's still possessiveness in a way, but the motivation behind it is a little bit different. But in both ways, it's very social interaction. And if you handle it wrong, then it can become resource guarding.
Yes, and that's where I've been lucky. He doesn't resource guard. He gets, like I said, maybe a certain item he might get a little bit more resource guardy on. But not that much. Not like to the point we're talking about where people can't reach down and get food, or they can't get the toy because the dog's turning into the asshole because of the resource guarding is taken to. Now the brain, to me, that's where the brain, something changes dramatically from it being like dopamine to stress. Yeah, high levels of cortisol happening, going, I'm stressed out, I don't know what to do about this, but I don't want to lose it, kind of thing.
Yes.
Yeah, it's a super interesting thing. I want to end it with this. You did a cool video, I don't know how many months ago it was, but let's just say 10, but you can tell me it's probably more than that. You were showing the difference between the pet stores in Germany versus the pet stores in the United States. And what I loved about it was pet stores in the United States, everything was bright colors, pink, everything made noises, squeaked, squawked, barked, whatever. Everything in Germany was brown and did not squeak. No. Why? What's the cultural difference? Why is it? And the funniest part was you showed some of the same exact toys. Just this toy was brown and boring looking, and then this one was like hot pink over here in the United States. What was kind of behind that?
Believe it or not, I got a lot of hate for that video too.
Really?
Yeah.
I thought it fascinating, but I lived over there, so I saw it. I didn't look at it in those days and times I lived there. I didn't pay attention to it.
Yeah. Well, yeah, because it's like people don't like to hear that we spoil it in the U.S. So I was told to go back to Germany, and then the Germans were like, "Well, you stay in the U.S." I'm like, "Hello." I am. Anyways, so it is very interesting. Yes, we have squeaky toys too in Germany, and it's not black and white, but on average, everything is very colorful and everything is very brown, gray, blackish, and it really is like that. I really find it. I don't mind. I mind it a little bit because I like the colors, but it's exactly what it is. We in the U.S. pet owners a lot. They buy things that also make themselves happy. And again, the toys that Ollie has, they're very colorful because it makes me happy to look at it too. And there's nothing wrong with it. It becomes a little bit of a problem when that replaces what truly matters for the dog being a dog, the species dog, right? And I think that is, on average, handled a little bit better in Germany than it is in the U.S. They are treated a little bit more like a dog, meaning a not human animal.
Correct.
And it's also being respected at that by others a little bit more. And it has something to do also how we interact as Germans with each other. I had someone who lives in the US, he reached out to me just to say, it's like, I have to share this with you. And I might be crazy, but I think I'm crazy. My wife thinks I'm crazy. But I went to Germany, we did a tour for 3 weeks, and I was like, these dogs, they're like all so good, well-behaved. They're walking off leash in the middle of the city. No one cares. They don't care about you. They don't care about other dogs. They walk as if they're like little robots, like following their owners.
So true.
And he was like, I got so paranoid. I had to start taking videos of all these dogs that annoyed the hell out of my wife. And I had to tell you because like, am I crazy? And I'm like, you're not crazy because I feel the same way. And when I grew up in Germany, I didn't notice this as being abnormal because I grew up that way, right? And then I came here and then I see the contrast. And I think it's subtle, but it's so accumulative, I think, that it makes a huge difference for a dog's being. And the main things that I observe is, for one, I don't know anyone who would get a dog living in a small apartment. The thought of getting a dog is just being planned as much as becoming a mom, getting a baby.
It's very true.
Like they're like, if I can't do this and this and this with this dog,
I don't have a garden, I don't have this, then
the other one is and I think a lot of people get training here too, but it's like almost you're looked down upon if you don't train your dog.
Very much
If
so.
you're a nuisance and the dog barks and everything, people, we Germans, we love to judge and we love to stare at people, and silent judging, we're really good at that.
Very good.
and that's just like, if you can't afford it, you don't get a dog either, right? So, and you go out your way and you train and you really put in the work. And then the other thing is, people love dogs, but also they kind of don't want to interact with them all the time. They don't go up.
They don't humanize them.
They don't humanize them.
Yeah.
It's like they're there, and friends bring their dogs, and there isn't constantly, right? And it's like no one comes up to you and says, "Can I say hi to your dog?" Like no one. It's probably rude if you were to do that, and you
It's the
didn't get judged
Schäferhund.
too.
Nine.
Yeah. And that together gives the dog a lot more, like, it gives the dog more freedom, being trained, but also not being bothered. And then the toys that you get, like I said, like, despite the colors, right, the toys you get are very functional. There's the dummy retrieve thing, that floats.
Bringsel, yeah.
And then the Futterbeutel, the thing that where you, like my friends, they would feed raw. But what they would do is, like, the way you eat is we put it in this little thing and we go on a walk and I throw it. And then we keep walking. On the way back, you can search for it, and that's your dinner.
Yeah.
You kind of hunted down your own dinner.
Yeah.
And, like, that's amazing for the dog,
Yes.
right? And that's very normal. This is not an outlier.
Yeah.
I think that makes a huge difference for the dog culture.
It's the way I look at it is, by living over there for almost 5 years, because the culture of dogs existed for hundreds of years over there, and dogs were a utility item. It was to pull the cart of meat, to protect the area, to protect the flock, to take care of all these things. Because if you look at it, many of the competitions are based out, European competitions are based out of those functions. Of course, over the years they become much different,
right.
But the origin of those. And like you said, growing up in the culture all those years, even though it's multi-generations now that have passed since then, it was the dog has a job, leave the dog alone, let the dog be. This is why dogs go everywhere with them.
Right.
Because dogs can be in the cafe while you're having your coffee, and they're there because they're there with you, and everybody has been brought up. Don't fuck with the dog.
Right.
Over here, the States is like, we gotta fuck with the dog because look, it has that pink harness on, and it was looking at me, and we did all that stuff. And then because our culture came into dogs as companions and emotional need kind of thing, we look at it very differently. So therefore, we're very outwardly with our emotions, where the Germans naturally aren't that way.
No.
And it was very utility oriented when it came to dogs, but also it was, I think the marketing is always built to that strategy too. The marketing for the dogs is utility over here and very cutesy emotionally over here.
Yes.
But what's so funny is so much in the United States, we kind of want the dogs to do what they do in Germany, like you said, or just in Europe in general, where they can be out, they can be these things, but we have a really bad way of doing it just because we don't have the culture behind us to really understand this is how they got there, this is why the rules are the way they are, where I'm in America, damn it, it's free. I have freedom. I can do what I want. So I want to pet your dog. I should be able to pet your dog.
Yes, yeah.
Where over there, they're like, 9? You don't even look at my dog.
No, right.
And we've both obviously seen it. The dogs love humans, but they don't actively seek the human out because that's never been a thing.
No.
Where over here, I mean, I don't know how many people wanted to come pet me and Natalie's dogs when we were at this last event in San Francisco working our bomb dogs, where because we had spaniels, we were obviously visually different too, and a spaniel can be visually appealing to want to come touch and say hi to. So we would get stopped every few minutes with somebody. Can I take a picture? Can I do this? Can I see the dog? Can I pet the dog? Because it's just how we are. But I 100% know in Germany, most wouldn't even look at us.
No.
They would walk right by, okay, do their thing. Because again, culturally, it's very different. It's unique how culture, it really drives the train in a lot of the things, good or bad, depending on what it is. Because as I end this, I've seen now Austria completely remove all bite sports. There is no biting anything anymore. Even the cops cannot have bite dogs anymore. That is now out, only with the exception of a specialty unit. So my friend who lives there, the one that you met, Florian, his business has shot way up because now with nobody able to do anything relating to biting, now they all want to do detection.
Right.
So his detection thing is like, I don't know his exact numbers, but I can just look at what I'm seeing on social media is easily doubled, if not more. And because again, over there, like you said, I have to do something with my dog.
Right.
The dog needs work, and if I can't use my dog in this fashion anymore, then I'm going to use it in this way.
Right.
So I think as it is funny, I'm watching the United States with all these different sports. And the jokes I make now with all our nose work people that come through is like, they don't just do nose work. They do dock diving, nose work, barn hunt. Yeah. On Friday we do agility. On Sunday we also go do rally. And then there's like all these things. So on the flip side, we have a lot of things that we do, and which creates some confusion to the dog. And then the other side, it's like, this is my sport. This is what we do.
Yes.
And it's funny because professionally, it's the exact same way. Over here, if I can get the dog to do 10 different disciplines under one dog as a professional, that's what we try to do. Over there, it's still very specialized.
Yes.
The dog will do this skill, and this is what you do.
Yes.
So
yeah. That's
thank you for taking the time to come on here. Again, that you're local. I am sure we will be doing other ones in some other good topics. But thank you for taking the time to come on and do this again and share the wide variety of knowledge you have, and especially with the dog's brain. So for those, for whatever reason, that don't know you, how do they find you? What's the website, social media handles, all that kind of good stuff?
So Canine Decoded is, I think, almost everywhere. My name.
Is it K number 9 or the word K9?
Like a whole written out.
Yep.
I realize some people don't even know how to spell it because we always say
K number 9. Yeah, exactly.
So it's written out. I'm now much more active, starting to be much more active on YouTube in long form for the reasons that we discussed at the beginning, to, kind of avoid some of the nasty discussions because something is out of context. So YouTube, I think YouTube is Dr. Melanie Uhde though. That Canine Decoded with Dr. Melanie Uhde.
Dr. Melanie Uhde, yeah.
So follow there and support me on YouTube. It's so hard to get into YouTube, break through that algorithm. But anyways, in the meantime, canindecoded.com, and Instagram is probably where I hang out the most. Canine Decoded there as well.
Yep. We'll put it all in the comments down below so everybody can find it and get a link to it. So, all right, everybody. Thank you for tuning in to Canines Talking Sense, where it's okay to be nosy.